In this video, I want to demonstrate the use of three different formulas, the SUM, SUMIF, and SUMIFS. Let's first start with SUM. The SUM is a very simple formula. If we type equals SUM, open up our parentheses, we can look at the little documentation here to see that SUM is going to take one required value and then additional optional values. The optional values, optional arguments, I should say, are indicated by these brackets, so you don't have to include any more than this one required value here. Basically, this value can be either a single cell or it can be a range of cells. So let's say we take our sample data here, and let's say that these represent the months of the year, so January through December, and then in the right-hand column, we have the total number of sales for that month. And let's say we want to know for every month of the year how, the total amount of sales made throughout the entire year. So what we would do is equal sum, and then we can just click on the first cell and drag down to highlight the rest of the cells, close our parentheses on the formula, press enter, and there's our total sales for the entire year. It just gave us the sum of this entire column, everything that we had put in that range. If we move on to SUMIF, it's going to be a pretty similar function, except that we can run the data against some criteria and only sum it if it meets that criteria. So for example, let's say we want to look at the total number of sales only for months June through December. Okay, so if the number in this column is greater than or equal to 6, we want to sum what is in this column. We say equals sum if, open up our parentheses, you can see that this, the documentation here looks a little bit different. So range is going to be the range which is tested against the criterion. So we are going to test this number against, a particular criterion. That criterion is going to be that it is greater than or equal to 6, which represents June. Okay? Now the criterion, how you're going to do that is put it in quotes, and then we can use inequality symbols, which would be greater than or equal to 6 in this case. Close the quotes. And then the sum range, now notice that the sum range is actually optional. So if we didn't put a sum range in here, the formula is just going to use the first range that we gave it. In other words, it's going to use this argument for the range that it is summing. But we want to know the total sales, so we are going to provide it with this third argument by just clicking, dragging down, and then closing our parentheses on the formula, pressing enter, and that is the result. If we want to double check that that's correct, we can actually just do a sum formula, and then highlight the ones that we know that we're trying to sum here. Same result. Now SUMIFS or SUMIFS is very, very similar to SUMIF, except that we can actually check against multiple criteria. So let's say that we want to check the same exact thing, but we only want to check, or we only want to sum the total sales if the total sales were above 2,000 for the month. So we can kind of just visually see that's going to be these two cells right here, but you might have a lot more data than this and you can't see that visually. So what we can do is sum IFS, open up our parentheses. All right, if we check our documentation here, sum range is going to be the range to sum in this case. All right, so we're going to give it, we want to know the total amount of sales. So we're going to give it that column, comma. Criteria range 1 is the range to check against criterion 1. Let's set up our month criteria first. So going to highlight this this column here, which represents the month, we only want month 6 or above, comma, the criterion is going to be the same thing we did for sum if greater than or equal to 6. Close the quotes and comma. Now we can just repeat this. We can really put in as many as we want here. The criteria range 2, so again, criteria range refers to the range of data that you are checking the criterion, checking against the criterion. Okay, so we are going to check this range now, the total amount of sales, and we only want to include that number if it is greater or equal to 2,000. Close the quotes, and that's it. So we can close our parentheses now and press enter, and there's our 4,200. 4,200. Now say, for example, you wanted to only do it for the second half of the year. You could come into this formula here, and let's change it to be greater than or equal to 7, aka July. Now 2,100. There you go. So those are 3 really awesome formulas in Excel. You might be familiar with sum, but knowing about sum if and sum ifs, sum IFS really adds a lot of capability. If you found this video helpful, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. And if there's something I can do to make these videos easier to understand or help in some way, leave me a comment. Let me know what it is.